Yes, yes, yes. Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back, Daily Boxing News. Shout out to the live chat crew. We're going to be talking about what's next for Dave Allen, but also touching on some other boxing topics, some boxing news, and having a general boxing chit-chat thereafter, all right? So first of all, some big ups. We got Tawheed. Shout out to you. KB, MT. Charlene, what's up? Sunshine, I am Mike. Johnny Concrete. Sean, Chainsaw, Jake, D. JR. Warts. What's happening? What's happening? We got Ruz in the building. Big up Ruz. I am Mike says, so many casuals going in on G-Man's video saying that Fisher should consider Misfits. Hilarious read. Well, I agree with him. I think that Fisher should consider Misfits. Yeah, I think that Fisher should consider... Oh, you mean what G-Man was saying? They're going in on G-Man for saying that he should consider Misfits. I get what you're saying. Okay. Yes, yes, Jake. I mean, when you look at Tommy Fury, his boxing background isn't too dissimilar from Johnny Fisher's boxing background, right? And Tommy Fury's done very well financially from doing Misfits fights, from beating YouTubers and what have you. So I reckon that's a good route for Johnny Fisher in order to keep the whole Bosch Army thing going, to continue making money, because realistically, I don't think he's got a very high ceiling. I've always felt this. Don't get it twisted. I still thought he had enough to, run around the ring and nick a decision over Dave Allen. So he's turned out to be even worse than I thought he was. Nevertheless, as bad as he is, and I mean no disrespect to the guy, Johnny Fisher always comes across as, very polite and well-mannered and all that. Got no issue with him whatsoever. I don't wish bad on him. But just looking at it as objectively as I can, to me, he doesn't really seem like he's got a very high ceiling. And he's spoken about how a few years ago, when he embarked on his pro career, his dad's business was massively in debt and they had all sorts of financial issues, and he's helped to sort the family out financially. So if he wants to continue that, rather than fighting on undercards for pennies on Eddie Hearn shows, relative pennies, if he goes the Misfits route, he might still be able to get decent purses. Not like the kind of purse, at least not in the short term, I wouldn't have thought, the kind of purse he would have gotten for the Dave Allen rematch, but still, better purses than he'll get fighting obscure Eastern European journeymen. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, I reckon Misfits is a good shout for Johnny Fisher. At least in the short term. If he can, let's say, fight in Misfits and beat everybody who's willing to fight him, and he continues to improve, then maybe he can look at going back into proper boxing. Do you know what I mean? Because this is a guy who only had a handful of amateur bouts, and some fighters with only a handful of amateur bouts progress very quickly and they get to a pretty good level. Case in point, Fabio Wardley. And I never imagined Fabio Wardley could go as far as he's gone. With no amateur background at all, just a couple of white collar bouts. It's very unusual for a guy with that type of background to be able to get that far. It does happen, and it has happened in the past, but it's definitely not the norm. So, yeah, Johnny Fisher doesn't have, obviously, what Fabio Wardley has. That type of, I want to say natural ability. He doesn't have that, evidently. And so, going to Misfits, continue improving, beat whoever you can beat there, whoever's willing to fight you, make a load of money. And if he's improved enough, return to proper boxing and see what you can do then in a few years' time. But shout out to everybody else who's joined the chat. We will get into this Dave Allen talk now. And I want this to be interactive. I want to get your take as I go through. So, what's next for Dave Allen? You guys can drop your suggestions in the chat throughout, all right? Is have a look at the UK top 20 heavyweights. This is the BoxRec rankings. Now, I've always been the first to say that BoxRec rankings are absolute trash because they are computer-generated rankings. It's not a person ranking these people, not last I checked with BoxRec anyway. Instead, they've got some kind of automated computer point system that ranks people according to the way they rate the fights based on these stars. And I don't know, it's some computer system, and that's why BoxRec often throws up very, very odd rankings indeed. The problem is, the British Boxing Board of Control do not publish their own rankings. So that's why I can't use theirs to go through potential opponents for, David Allen next. And that's assuming he even wants to fight a UK fighter, because Dave Allen spoke about maybe even fighting in Doncaster. Would he want to fight against some obscure Eastern Europeans? Does he want a couple of knockover jobs? Does he even want to have proper fights with Eddie Hearn? Because Eddie Hearn doesn't really have much of a heavyweight stable these days. So we shall see, because that is the situation right now for those of you who don't know. As a condition of getting the Johnny Fisher rematch, Dave Allen had to agree to have 2 fights with Eddie Hearn after the rematch. So that's what it is. Some of us were hoping that Dave Allen would instead go and sign with Frank Warren. Do you know what I mean? But no, he's with Eddie Hearn for his next 2 fights. But if Eddie Hearn's got no decent options for him, and perhaps Dave Allen thinks that Eddie Hearn doesn't have any decent options for him, then maybe he just looks to have a couple of run-outs, against whoever, and then move on and sign with a different promoter. We shall see. But then again, Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren's relationship is pretty good these days, so perhaps it doesn't matter so much that Dave Allen is with Eddie Hearn rather than Frankie Boy. So anyway, that is what that is. This is the BoxRec top 20 UK heavyweights, all right? I'm not going to go all the way up to number 1 in terms of potential opponents for Dave Allen's next 2 fights, because some of them are just not realistic. But we'll start from number 20. So this is the first guy here, a potential Dave Allen opponent. I have never seen this guy before in my life. He's called Eddie Omoregi. I think that's how you pronounce it. Never seen him before in my life, never heard of him. I did type his name into YouTube to see what comes up, and there were no fights of his. There was a couple of clips of him training, but no clips of him actually fighting. So, obscure guy. Not sure Dave Allen will want to go that obscure. We'll see. Number 19 in the BoxRec UK heavyweight rankings is this guy. Based in Wales, Swansea to be precise, Moses Jolly. Now, there is some footage of this guy on YouTube actually fighting. And, how could I describe him? Yeah, I'm laughing already because this guy's level, I want to say, is white collar. Yeah, that's what this guy looks like to me. He looks like a rank and file, typical white collar boxer. So the level is not very good is what I'm saying. Yeah, you go and look this guy up on YouTube, you'll see what I mean. Moses Jolly. Is this the type of guy Dave Allen wants to fight next? How many of you, I can't imagine there's going to be many of you. I'm just asking a question. Have any of you seen this Moses Jolly guy fight? I'm going to assume not. There's a few other suggestions coming in. We'll come on to those as we go up through the rankings. But yeah, no one's ever heard of this Moses Jolly guy. He's a very big individual. Yeah, he looks happy. So Jolly by name, Jolly by nature, right? He looks happy. But, okay, Matthew Clark says, I have once. He is shocking. Yeah, he's shocking. Shocking. I would struggle to believe that Dave Allen would want to fight a guy like this. And even if he did want to fight a guy like this, I'm not sure Eddie Hearn would want to make the fight. So, you know, hopefully it won't be this guy. Moving up to number 18, somebody that several of you have suggested, Jamie TKV. His actual surname is Jamie Shakiva, which I don't find so difficult to pronounce that you would need to use the acronym of TKV, but there you go. Jamie Shakiva, he, last I checked, has got a rematch coming up with David Adelaide. So I wouldn't have thought that the David Allen fight would be the next thing for him. But maybe if he manages to beat David Adelaide in the rematch, you might see Jamie TKV in there against Dave Allen. And personally, I said this in either the live stream I did on the night of the Dave Allen-Johnny Fisher rematch or in my post-fight video. Personally, I would pick TKV to beat Dave Allen. If he boxes the way he did, even in the first Adelaide fight, as slick as he was, as good as his jab was, yeah, I'd pick him to win. Dave Allen's got a lot of experience. Dave Allen probably physically stronger and hits harder and all that. But TKV's got some slickness to him, which I wasn't even aware of before. Because I'd seen a few TKV fights and it never impressed me. But the way he was boxing against Adelaide, and he was a lot lighter, by the way, against Adelaide than he's been for recent bouts. And it really helped with his fluidity, his speed, and all that kind of stuff. He needs to be fighting at that weight or maybe even lighter for the rest of his career. You know, he needs to be taking it that seriously all the time. And if he were to get a Dave Allen fight next, I have to imagine he would take it that seriously. Because he wouldn't want to end up like Johnny Fisher. You know what I mean? So, yeah, personally, I would pick TKV to win that fight. Then again, I picked Johnny Fisher to beat Dave Allen, and he proved me wrong. But I always saw Johnny Fisher as an accident waiting to happen. I always saw him as a gimmick fighter. I always referred to him as a gimmick fighter. I see Jamie TKV as being a lot better than Johnny Fisher, based upon what I've seen in their last couple bouts. So, yeah, I'd pick him to beat Dave Allen. But it's a good fight for Dave Allen, particularly if TKV can get that British heavyweight title. That's something that Dave Allen's never won. And there'll be an opportunity there potentially. And it would not surprise me at all if the British Boxing Board of Control sooner rather than later actually order the winner of Jamie TKV, David Adelaide 2, to fight Dave Allen. Yeah, again, we don't have access, the public don't, to the British Boxing Board of Control's rankings, at least not last time I checked their website, and I've been checking it for years. They don't publish their rankings for some strange reason, if they even have a set of rankings on paper anywhere. But yeah, it'd be a good opportunity for Dave Allen. So yeah, that's a potential opponent there for him, depending on if Jamie TKV beats Adelaide in the rematch. Number 17 in the rankings is Nick Webb, somebody who Dave Allen already chinned several years ago. And Nick Webb has done nothing since to entice Dave Allen to fight him again. And I'm not even sure Nick Webb would want smoke with Dave Allen again. So I think we can move on past him. At number 16, we've got Sol Dakers. Dacres is coming off that first round knockout loss to David Alai. So, again, I wouldn't have thought that would be an attractive fight for Dave Allen. Certainly not much of a marketable fight. So, I think we can move on from Sol Dacres. Number 15 is Johnny Fisher himself. Apparently, there is a rematch option in the contract, but Team Fisher, at least the people who care about his well-being and his health, would be absolutely nuts to take a Dave Allen trilogy fight next. Totally insane. Johnny Fisher needs several years of development, based upon what I've seen, before they put him back in with Dave Allen. Do you know what I mean? Like literally several years of development, and Dave Allen needs to deteriorate significantly. So, yeah, I don't think that would be a good idea for Johnny Fisher. Maybe Dave Allen would want it because it could be another big payday for him. But more caring heads should prevail in that situation by way of Johnny Fisher's family, presumably his manager, maybe even Johnny himself. They'll go in a different direction. Eddie Hearn might want, and some other people might want, the Dave Allen trilogy sooner rather than later because it's all about money for them. They're not so much thinking about the fighter's welfare as the people closer to him. So anyway, that's Johnny Fisher. I personally would be surprised if a trilogy fight were to happen next. Number 14 in the rankings is Dave Allen himself, so we can skip past him. Number 13 is Moses Itama. Now, Itama is fighting on the Josh Taylor Echo Esserman undercard this weekend against an obscure opponent. If he gets past him, Frank Warren is claiming that he could be fighting somebody like a Martin Bakole or Filip Hrgovic by the end of the year. Now, previously it said that Moses Itama would fight Martin Bakole next. Unless Itama isn't going to fight again until the end of the year, then he's already shown that he wasn't sincere about what he was saying. Unless it's down to Martin Bakole's team saying they're not up for it next. I don't know, but I would be very, very surprised if Moses Itama fought Hrgovic or Bakole in his next bout after he gets past the opponent on the weekend. I'd be very surprised by that. I think it's a lot of marketing from Frank Warren personally. You know, maybe he'll prove me wrong, but yeah, I think it's clout chasing that Frank Warren's doing. Dave Allen, in terms of progressing Moses Itama's career, would be, you know, particularly the way that he dispatched of Johnny Fisher, it would be a decent fight, a decent development fight for Itama. But then you look at the ranking of Itama, and I'm talking about with the world sanctioning bodies, never mind the British heavyweight ranking. He's in the top 10 of at least one of them, and Dave Allen isn't. So it may not make sense to fight Dave Allen from that perspective. Although I'm sure the guy he's fighting this weekend isn't in the top 15 of any of the major sanctioning bodies either. But this appears to be like a little tick-over fight. He's been up the ring for a little bit. His next move, presumably, is going to be a fairly major move, a fairly big step up against a recognizable name. So, I don't know. I'm not sure whether Itama or his team would view Dave Allen as being enough of a step up for them. But who knows? We'll see. You know, it's hard to be talking about the Martin Bakoles and Filip Hrgovic's of the world and then go and fight Dave Allen. Do you know what I mean? No disrespect to Dave Allen, but it just seems a bit mad. So I can't see that one happening, personally. I think that's pretty unlikely. Number 12 in the rankings, we got Frazer Clarke, who already beat Dave Allen a few fights back and beat him comfortably. I mean, Frazer Clarke never had any issues in the fight whatsoever. and he forced Dave Allen to actually quit on his stool with a perforated eardrum. I know that Jamie Moore has come out and said that Dave didn't quit, but Dave himself has admitted that he did. It's a matter of a trainer trying to protect his fighter's reputation. Trainers often do this in the corner, and I explained this in the video I uploaded earlier on today. With most commissions, they require the fighter to consent to being pulled out of a fight. And you'll often see this in the corner. Sometimes the camera will get right in and you'll be able to hear the conversation between the trainer, the ref, and the fighter. So the trainer will go to the ref and say, we're stopping the fight, we want to pull him out. The ref will then go to the fighter in the corner and he wants to hear it from the fighter's mouth. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes they'll play this little game where the trainer says, oh, he wants to quit, he doesn't want to continue. And the ref will say, is that what you want? You want to quit the fight? And the fighter will say, whatever the trainer says. See the little game they play to have a little bit of plausible deniability so the fighter can't get blamed for quitting? As I say, I don't blame fighters for quitting in tough fights. I've never been somebody that condemns that action. So anyway, Dave Allen did quit against Frazer Clarke. Clarke handled him with ease. I can't imagine Dave Allen will want to go back in with Frazer Clarke anytime soon. But who knows? Boxing's a funny sport. And Frazer Clarke did get blasted out a couple fights back in one round by Fabio Wardley. But since then, he blasted Ebenezer Tete out in one round. The very same Ebenezer Tete who went several rounds with Dylan White and never even hit the canvas. Was competitive against Dylan White. And we'll come on to Dylan White in a moment. Number 11 is David Adeleye. And as I was saying with Jamie TKV, Adeleye being a potential next opponent for Dave Allen is probably contingent on whether Adeleye keeps hold of that British heavyweight title. Now, Adeleye was actually asked about a Dave Allen fight, and he said that Dave Allen needs to do a bit more in order to get a shot against him. So it doesn't seem like Adeleye is particularly keen. I mean, whether his reason for dismissing the Allen fight next is valid or not, that's what he said. He said, paraphrasing, Dave Allen needs to do a bit more than just beat a Johnny Fisher in order to get a fight with me. Make of that what you will. And if he remains British heavyweight champion after beating Jamie TKV, again, it would seem unlikely that Dave Allen will get the opportunity, unless he's mandated by the British Boxing Board of Control. But then you might see Adeleye relinquish the belt, move on to bigger and better things, potentially. Unless there's going to be a load of money in it for him. If they can make the financial incentive big enough, maybe he takes it. So, Adeleye is a potential. Another potential, and by the way, I think that if Jamie TKV were to beat David Adeleye in their rematch, that the TKV fight is one of the most likely contests for Dave Allen next. I reckon that's one of the more likely ones. As is the next fighter in the rankings here. At number 10, Hughie Fury. Hughie Fury has been in the wilderness for many, many years, fighting in obscurity. He's now 30 years of age. He's not only not getting younger, he's not getting any better, based upon what I've seen in his past few contests. I'm going to assume that he's sparred a lot with Dave Allen in the past, so they'll be very familiar with each other. I reckon Dave Allen probably rates Hughie Fury. But would he be willing to fight him? Since he rates him. I mean, again, I'm assuming, would he be willing to fight him? Does he think that Hughie Fury has maybe deteriorated enough for him to want to fight him? I personally think this fight is one of the more likely ones, as I say, because of the fact that Hughie Fury is looking for an opportunity. Not like Dave Allen is a world beater or anything, but he's coming off a high-profile win. Johnny Fisher had, and probably still does have, this big cult following, mainly based in Essex. They were able to sell out the Copper Box and I'm sure do pretty good numbers, pretty good viewership on DAZN. So Huey Fury may want to have a slice of that action and take on Dave Allen coming off that victory. So I reckon this is one of the fights they will be looking at. At number 9, in the UK heavyweight rankings on BoxRec, we got Joe Joyce. Now, I've heard that Joyce might be fighting somebody else. So I'm not sure if Dave Allen's a realistic opponent for him. Again, Joyce is probably looking well above the Dave Allen levels. Do you know what I mean? For an opponent next. So I'd be surprised if that one happened. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. You reckon Joe Joyce will be willing to fight at Dave Allen? And if he was, how do you see the fight going? Me personally, I would see Joe Joyce winning that all day. At number 8, we got Richard Riakporhe. I think this is also a possibility, you know. Richard Riakporhe hasn't fought anyone great at heavyweight so far. He's just moved up to the weight class. He was a highly ranked contender at cruiserweight. He obviously lost to Chris Billum-Smith in his world title attempt. But he's trying to acclimatize to the heavyweight division now. Obviously, the Lawrence Okolie fight fell through. And in order to keep his name on people's lips and what have you, I wouldn't be surprised if he entertained a Dave Allen fight. Richard Riakporhe has never had a particularly high profile. In fact, I'm certain Dave Allen's profile is bigger than Richard Riakporhe's is, despite Riakporhe gallivanting around with that old pensioner, Madonna, you know? So it would not surprise me if that fight got made. Richard Riakporhe versus Dave Allen. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Number 7 in the rankings, we got Del Boy, Derek Chisora. He has outright dismissed the notion that he should fight Dave Allen next or that he could be a potential opponent for Dave Allen. His attitude was, you're insulting me by suggesting I could be an opponent next for Dave Allen. The same way that he felt insulted when people were suggesting that he could be an opponent for Johnny Fisher. You guys remember that? Maybe might have been after the Alan Babich fight, where Fisher knocked Babich out in a round. People were suggesting Derek Chisora next for Johnny Fisher, and Derek Chisora was incensed. He was like, are you really insulting me like that? Acting like I could be an opponent for this Johnny Fisher guy. I'm way above that level. That was Derek Chisora's attitude, okay? And he's acting the same way with Dave Allen. Now, obviously, particularly in hindsight, I mean, the gulf in levels between Chisora and Johnny Fisher, we now know is vast. I mean, it was big before, but now we know it's like the Grand Canyon. So Johnny is lucky he didn't get his wish. Eddie Hearn as well in fighting Derek Chisora. The gap between Dave Allen and Chisora is nowhere near as big. Dave Allen wants that fight. I heard him, I think it might have been in a video on his YouTube channel, somewhere since his victory over Johnny Fisher. He's expressed interest in fighting Chisora. He said it would be a dream come true. Chisora's a legend, this, that, and the other. So Dave Allen's up for the fight. But Derek Chisora doesn't seem interested at all. Okay, so unlikely, but maybe if they can stump up enough money, Derek Chisora would take it. He's all about the money at the end of the day. And finally, in terms of halfway realistic opponents for Dave Allen next, at number 6, we got Dillian Whyte. Now, I haven't heard Dillian Whyte talk about whether or not he'd be interested in fighting Dave Allen. I'm going to assume, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, that he'd take a similar attitude to Derek Chisora and basically act insulted that you even associated his name with Dave Allen, because he beat Dave Allen years ago and did it comfortably. Now, most of us think that Dillian Whyte has deteriorated significantly since then. But Dillian Whyte probably doesn't have the same view. He probably thinks he's not too far off where he was when he fought Dave Allen all those years ago. So, all he's talking about is fighting the Anthony Joshuas. And in fact, I saw the live stream that Tunde Ajayi and Spencer Fearon did the other day. And, I'm not saying that their information is gospel or anything like that, but they spoke about this rumor that they've heard behind the scenes that Anthony Joshua was actually looking at the Dillian Whyte fight as part of a 3-fight deal. It's very interesting, actually. They said that the rumor is the 3-fight deal AJ is discussing with Turkey involves a Dillian Whyte fight first, then a fight against Jared Anderson, which is a surprise, kind of random, and finally, a Tyson Fury fight. In that order. Dillian Whyte, Anderson, and then Fury. Obviously, he's got to win the first two in order to get the Gypsy King at the end. So, make of that what you will. And if there's any validity to that, then there's obviously no way, I wouldn't have thought, that Dillian Whyte's going to fight Dave Allen. So, I doubt that fight would happen. And if it did happen, as I said during the live stream, personally, I'd still give Dillian Whyte the edge. Yes, he's very, very chinny these days, but he has beaten Dave Allen in the past. And other than punch resistance, for me, he's still better than Dave Allen in every single department. He's a more skilled boxer. He's got a better jab. Usually he throws better combinations, although, Dave Allen unleashed an impressive combination on Johnny Fisher to finish the fight. But normally Dillian Whyte is a better combination puncher than Dave Allen. Puts his shots together more fluidly and more consistently. And I want to say Dillian Whyte's got a better boxing brain than Dave Allen as well. So I'd still be leaning towards Dillian Whyte regardless of the deterioration. Perhaps it would be a more competitive fight. In fact, I'm almost certain it would be a more competitive fight now than it was when they fought back in the days. But I would still edge Whyte to win just about. I still reckon he can get rid of Dave Allen. Well, not stop him, but, get past Dave Allen. So, anyway, that's up to number 6. The rest of the heavyweights, there's really no point talking about them fighting Dave Allen. Fabio Wardley's gone way clear of that level. So he's not going to be fighting Dave Allen anytime soon. Lawrence Okolie, he's looking for people who are either world champions or interim world champions, something like that. That's what Lawrence Okolie's looking for. So I'd be surprised if he was willing to fight Dave Allen. Tyson Fury is quote-unquote retired. Anthony Joshua, again, I can't see him fighting Dave Allen. I mean, never say never. Let's say for some bizarre reason the Dillian Whyte fight doesn't come off. If this 3-fight deal, as described by Spencer and Tunde, is actually a thing. Let's say the first fight, the Dillian Whyte fight, doesn't come off. Would Anthony Joshua be willing to fight Dave Allen instead of a Dillian Whyte? Would that even be marketable? Would Turki Al-Sheikh and Eddie Hearn and everyone involved want to do that fight? I mean, maybe. It would be pretty bizarre, right? But Eddie Hearn doesn't exactly have a lot of heavyweights, And if Dave Allen is useful to him in that situation, bear in mind Dillian Whyte's with Frank Warren now. If Dave Allen's useful to him in that situation, maybe he will make Dave Allen versus Anthony Joshua. I wouldn't have thought so, but boxing is a funny old game. And then, of course, number 1 in the UK, Daniel Dubois. That's not going to happen, Dubois against Dave Allen. So there you have it. I'll come on to your questions and comments now. And then we'll talk a little bit about some other news, such as Jack Catterall versus Harlem Eubank announced on Saturday. I'll give you my thoughts on that. But first of all, questions and comments. Got some super chats here, which I'll tend to first. Big up Matt in the chat. He says, I want to ask you about boxing as a sport in contrast between American boxing versus UK boxing. I feel like they are completely different sports. Do you agree? Completely different sports? What do you mean by that? I mean, boxing is boxing, right? Are you talking about the styles? Are you talking about the way that the fighters are managed? I'm not exactly sure what you mean in terms of completely different sports. So please elaborate on that first one. The second one, Matt says, also, what are your thoughts on everyone mega glazing Moses Itama? I'm sick of people crowning someone as the next great without showing it. What do I think about it? I understand it. Obviously, there have been many talented fighters that have come along over the years who had loads of potential but did not fulfill it. So, of course, we can't know or say for certain that this guy is going to be ruling over the heavyweight division for years to come. But what I can say is that Moses Itama is absolutely a prodigy. He's not an ordinary prospect. Okay, he is somebody with special talent and special potential. But again, he has to go and fulfill it. So that's what I'll say about that. I mean, it's natural that people would be excited about somebody who's that prodigious. And he is that prodigious. It's not normal for a 14, 15-year-old boy to be going to professional boxing gyms, right? Getting invited to professional boxing gyms, sparring with world champions, coming to the gym in his school uniform, and then jumping in there with world champion cruiserweights and heavyweights. That's not normal, right? That was happening with Moses Itama because he's just that good, right? But he's got to deliver, obviously. There's a difference between being able to do it in the gym and being able to do it under the bright lights in pro fights, for sure. So personally, I'm very excited about Itama's future because of his potential. But we'll see whether he can show us that he's got the intangibles. Can he take a shot? Does he have the heart? Because he's going to have to answer those questions at some point. At some stage, he's going to come across somebody who is impervious to his power and who has enough ability to drag him into a dogfight, hit him with body shots, hit him hard on the chin, and then we'll see what's really good with Moses Itama. If you haven't got those intangibles, yeah, you're not going to last very long at the top level in professional boxing, particularly not in the heavyweight division, because the guys hit so hard. You're going to need heart and you're going to need a chin if you're going to last the test of time. Matt also says, Itama really only had 24 amateur fights. Sure, he was a British national champion, but how is that compared to Golden Gloves, Olympic pedigree, and so on? Well, Itama actually fought in international tournaments when he was an amateur. I'm just going to get his amateur career up now. Yeah, he only had 20-something amateur fights, that's true, but he was actually fighting. He actually started boxing when he was around 9 or 10. So it's kind of curious for somebody who's been boxing since he was that age, why he's had so few amateur fights. That is kind of curious. But, maybe he wasn't disciplined or drifted away from the sport or whatever the case may be. But he did start boxing very, very young. So I'm just going to get his amateur record up here. Yeah, so Itama fought in the Youth World Championships. It's an international tournament. And beat everybody in the Youth World Championships. He also fought in the European Youth Championships. Beat everybody there as well. So he has fought in international tournaments on several occasions. Also fought in the European Junior Championships finals. So even though his amateur career is relatively short, 20-something fights, it was filled with international tournaments. You know, it wasn't like he was just fighting domestically in the UK, in ABA, you know, championships and what have you. No, he was fighting against international opposition who have gone on, in some cases, to be elite amateurs at heavyweight and super heavyweight. So, yeah, that's what you have to bear in mind. He wasn't fighting regular schmegular guys. He was fighting very good kids. So, and they had to match him that way, because if he was just fighting on the domestic UK scene, it'd be probably a bunch of one-round blowouts. They had to put him in the international tournaments because he was just that good. So if you check out his amateur record, maybe I'll drop it in the chat. You'll see what I'm talking about in terms of all the tournaments he was in. I've dropped it in the chat there. Matt says, if that's the case, what are your thoughts on Moses fighting the likes of Jared Anderson or Richard Torres right now? I feel like that's realistic. I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think it is realistic for him to be fighting Anderson or Torres right now. The question is, would his team want those fights right now? And would the teams of Anderson or Torres want to fight Itama right now? This is the problem. When you've got young fighters on the way up, the tendency is, unless one promoter has got both guys, to not match young guys against each other, especially when they're unbeaten. And this is even more of a thing in the US. In the US, it's so rare for them to match two young, hot prospects who are both unbeaten against it. It's so rare in the US. It's more common in UK boxing for that to happen. And I want to say part of the reason for it is that you can still earn good money as an unbeaten prospect in the UK fighting another unbeaten prospect. Whereas in the US, a lot of the time there's not going to be any money in it for the guys, right? But because the UK's got this very, I don't want to say unique, but rare boxing culture whereby long before you reach world level, in the case of certain fighters, you've garnered a big following from your local community, and therefore you're selling a lot of tickets. Johnny Fisher being an example. And that equates to purses which are beyond what you would expect for such an inexperienced fighter. So, I don't know. I would like to see Itama fight somebody like that. Yeah, he's ranked in the top 10. I'm not sure where Anderson's ranked right now, but Richard Torres is definitely ranked in the top 10 or top 15. So yeah, I reckon it's realistic to put Itama in there against Richard Torres. Absolutely, 100%. I'd like to see it. In fact, they were talking about Moses Itama fighting Justice Hooney not too long ago, who's on a similar level, I think, to Torres. If not that level, not too far off. An unbeaten guy, young guy. But shout out to Matt. Seb says one of the Europeans he stopped every person he fought as well. I guess you're talking about Itama's amateur opponents. Yeah, he was in international tournaments. They were all junior tournaments. But yeah, there were international tournaments against the best juniors around. In fact, let me get the world heavyweight rankings up right here and give you my suggestions for who I'd like to see Itama fight next after this guy he's taking on the weekend, assuming he gets past him. It's heavyweight boxing, anything can happen. So, Itama against Derek Chisora. I like that fight. I don't think Del Boy would take it unless you pay him a king's ransom. But I'd like to see Itama fight Chisora, yes. That's a fight I'd like to see next. Richard Torres, yep, I'd like to see that. Vianello is actually a good shout. He just came off that loss to Torres, so I'd like to see that. Daniel Pero. Yeah, one of the Pero brothers. I've got no problem with them making Moses Itama versus Daniel Pero. Spoken about Justice Honey before. Who else we got here? Just looking through. Otto Wallin is another good shout. Yeah, I'd like to see him fight Otto Wallin. Murat Gassiev somehow is in the WBO top 10. That's a madness. But Murat Gassiev, former cruiserweight champion. Jared Anderson, as Matt already suggested. That's a perfectly good fight. And Itama, for the record, is actually ranked number 2 with the WBO. I'm not sure if he's ranked with... Oh, no, he's ranked number 3 by the WBA as well. Crazy high rankings, considering he really hasn't beaten anyone. And he's ranked number 7 by the IBF. So I guess that's the influence of not only the hype surrounding Itama, but also the power of his promoter right now, Frank Warren. So ranked 7 by the IBF. I don't think he's ranked at all by the WBC, as far as I can see here. Oh, no, excuse me. Is he? My eyes are deceiving me. No, he's not. So, yeah, he's ranked number 7 by the IBF. Number 3 by the WBA. Not ranked by the WBC, but is ranked at number 2 by the WBO. So, yeah, he needs to be fighting top 10 opposition. Long story short. To justify these rankings. And I think he's more than ready for top 10 opposition myself. So, yeah, let's see it. Matt with another super chat says, even someone like a Joe Joyce or Hrgovic could be good for Itama. Well, you know what? Give Zhang his flowers and put him against him. Personally, I think that Hrgovic is kicking on beyond an Itama. I don't think that's a good fight for Itama personally. Maybe a little too early to put him in with a Hrgovic. Joe Joyce, yes. So I'd say Joyce would be a good shout for Itama. Zhang, again, I reckon that's a little too risky just because of the power and the experience of Zhang. But Joe Joyce, stylistically, and in terms of how much he's deteriorated, yeah, I can see that as a good fight for Moses Itama next. And just to clarify, we're talking about who Itama should fight next after this little run out on the weekend. And yeah, I think Joyce would be a good one. Whether Joyce would be interested or not, different story. Shout out to James for the super chat. He says, on the plane off to Spain. Big up James for super chatting from the plane. He says, we'll catch the recording on the other side. Wishing all the channel subscribers a great week. Get the likes up for Hatman. Big up, big up. And a safe flight. Enjoy your trip. Shout out to G-Man in the chat. Shout out to Dominic A. Star Fox. Hyro Protagonist. Says Joyce could be a real test. He still has elite fitness and output. Don't want to see Joyce take that punishment though, because no doubt Itama will land some big shots. Yeah, when you're dealing with a young prospect on the way up, building towards a world title, personally, I don't expect them to fight all the most dangerous guys. Do you know what I mean? In the run-up to a title shot, I expect them, and I make allowances for them to be somewhat strategic. I do think they have to, certainly if they're going to get a mandatory shot, they have to earn it, right? They have to be involved in eliminators and final eliminators and whatnot, and it should be against dangerous fighters. But up until that point, I don't mind if they're careful. And when I say careful, picking opponents in the top 10 who are good because they're in the top 10, so they have to be at a certain level, but maybe selecting certain styles that they think will be safer than others. I don't really have a problem with promoters, fighters, managers doing that with a young, upcoming prospect, contender. Do you know what I mean? As they build towards a world title shot. It's once you become a champion, that's when you should be obligated to fight the best opposition each and every time. But when you're a contender, you're building towards it. Unless you're getting a mandatory shot, as I say, I can accept you're going to be strategic with your matchmaking. To some extent, within reason. Tommy says, what about Tony Yoka? Well, word has it that they might be making Joe Joyce versus Tony Yoka. Obviously, they fought in the amateurs. Tony Yoka got a controversial decision in the Olympics. I think it's about time they made that fight. They had that rematch in the pros. In fact, it's overdue. And given the similar position they're both in their pro careers, probably never been a better time. So, yeah, I welcome that fight between Joe Joyce and Tony Yoka. And it's probably far more likely that that's going to happen than Itama fighting Joyce or Yoka, I think. Because Joyce, I want to say, is still a bigger name than Itama, based upon the fights he's been in, beating Daniel Dubois, beating Joe Parker, great wins, right? Fighting Zhang a couple of times. Weren't those fights in the O2 or was it the Copper Box? I forget now. But yeah, Joyce is still a bigger name than Itama. So that's attractive for Tony Yoka. And Yoka has seen Joyce get beat a few times. So he'll have some level of confidence going up against Joyce. Also the fact he's boxed him in the amateurs. And Tony Yoka, I'm not sure what it's like now, but at one point, he was really popular in France. So I can see how that fight would be far more attractive to both guys than either one of them fighting Moses Itama. Unless Frank Warren's willing to throw an obscene amount of money at him. This is the issue with Itama, is getting people in the ring with him. The opponents that they would want for him, in many cases, are probably going to ask for a king's ransom. Shout out to High Roll for the super chat. He says, will Itama's development suffer from being in the Davison gym? Okay, that's an interesting comment, interesting question. So I guess you don't rate Ben Davison? Personally, I think Ben Davison's a good trainer. I felt this for a very long time. The greatest trainers in the world go through periods where many of their fighters are losing. Manny Stewart went through it. And for me, Manny Stewart is the greatest trainer of all time. But yet he went through periods where his fighters, many of them in the gym, were losing. So you go through good spells and bad spells. And of late, Ben Davison hasn't been going through a particularly good spell. But he's had other points in his career as a trainer where things have been going very well. So personally, I do rate him, but that's just me. Other people do not, and that's okay. So the short answer is I don't think Itama's development will suffer from being in the Davison gym, especially with the other fighters they've got in there. Anthony Joshua, Fabio Wardley, Alois Jr., who's a cruiserweight prospect coming up, etc. I think Itama should be fine in there, at least for now. We'll see over the long term whether there's certain elements of his game that are lacking, because at the end of the day, I always say this, there's no one-size-fits-all trainer. Just because Manny Stewart, for example, was good for Tommy Hearns and good for Klitschko and Lennox Lewis and various other fighters, he wasn't necessarily the best trainer for everybody. He didn't produce great results with Prince Nassim. It's like he tried to make Prince Nassim too conventional. So we'll see over the long haul whether Ben Davison is the right guy for Itama. But personally, I think Ben Davison is a good trainer. But shout out to Hyro Protagonist for the super chat. In fact, let's talk about this fight that I've got up on screen here. It's been on screen for a while. Jack Catterall versus Harlem Eubank just announced. This is a bit of a random fight. I didn't think we'd be hearing that this would be Jack Catterall's next opponent. And my initial reaction is, surely this is a comfortable win for Jack Catterall. Harlem Eubank has yet to produce the type of form in the ring that would convince me that he can beat a guy like Catterall. Harlem Eubank really hasn't fought anyone. He came off a win over Tyrone McKenna, stopped him. Well, McKenna's been stopped several times in the past, recently. So I'm not sure why some people are particularly impressed with his performance against McKenna. Other people have done very similar things. Jack Catterall has fought at a much higher level and succeeded at a much higher level than Harlem Eubank. Now, that doesn't mean that Harlem Eubank can't break into that upper echelon, in this case now of the 147-pound division. Both guys are actually moving up from 140. Every fighter at a certain stage of their career hasn't fought anyone, right? Even Mayweather back in the days. Very early stages of his career, he was taking on journeyman, fringe contenders and whatnot. He hadn't fought anyone. But when he did step up, he was still able to beat fighters who had fought people, who had beaten better opposition than Mayweather had beaten up to that point, right? Up to that juncture. So all young upcoming fighters will cross that Rubicon, if you like. But as I say, against the opponents that Harlem Eubank has fought so far, relatively low level, he hasn't shone so brightly against those fighters to convince me that he is going to succeed when he steps up. And this is a major step up for him against Jack Catterall. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's got more in the tank and more potential than I'm giving him credit for. Maybe there are certain things that I'm just not seeing in him. I guess we'll find out, right? Because they're going to fight over 12 rounds on July 5th at the Manchester Arena. Just to give you a couple of stats here. Jack Catterall, 30-2. Harlem Eubank, 21-0. But this is the crucial thing I want people to look at. Jack Catterall, 32 years of age. Harlem Eubank is 31. All right, so this isn't some 25-year-old who's got his whole career ahead of him. No. This guy's 31 years of age. So, obviously Catterall coming off that loss to Barboza, very close fight. And Harlem Eubank coming off that stoppage victory over Tyrone McKenna. Jack Catterall, obviously a southpaw. Harlem Eubank, orthodox. You know, somebody asked me, I think it was in a live stream several weeks ago, whether I thought that Harlem Eubank was an inferior version of Chris Eubank Sr. I think that was the question they asked. Or whether, in fact, no, they might have said whether I thought Eubank Jr. was an inferior version of Harlem Eubank. And my answer was, I think it's the exact opposite way around. I think that Harlem Eubank is an inferior version of Chris Eubank Jr. That's how it looks to me. Again, if I'm wrong, hey, he proves me wrong. But from all I've seen of him in his, career so far, to me, he looks like an inferior version of his cousin, Chris Jr. Jake says, Hatman, do you honestly think Itama could beat AJ? I think he could. I don't see AJ as a confident fighter to be able to old man a young energetic fighter. A few stiff jabs on his snot box, he'd shell up. I agree with you. I actually agree with you. Yes, I think that Moses Itama could beat Anthony Joshua right now. And the way you described it really was perfect to me. AJ might be able to still beat, possibly, some top 10 fighters out there if he gets the right style. But as you said, against a young, energetic fighter who's willing to let his hands go, I think that is an absolute nightmare for Anthony Joshua. I mean, we saw it against Daniel Dubois, right? A young, energetic fighter willing to let his hands go. Obviously, Dubois and Itama are different, but they're both young and they've both got energy. You know? In fact, let me tell you how much energy Itama's got. I was watching a video about Ben Davison's gym earlier on today, funny enough. In fact, let me see if I still got the tab open here. I might have closed the tab. If the tab's open, I can tell you the exact name of the video. I think I closed it. But anyway, there was a video uploaded over the past few days about Ben Davison's gym. And it's about, 10, 15 minutes long. And they're interviewing his fighters. They don't interview AJ. I don't think he was in the gym, but they're interviewing, doing brief clips of interviews with Fabio Wardley, Alois Jr., Moses Itama, etc. And at one point, one of the coaches in there who assists Ben Davison disagreed with something that Moses Itama said. Because Moses Itama said, I think it's better to be overtrained than undertrained going into a fight. And Alois Jr., well, first of all, this trainer started disagreeing with Moses, saying, no. It's better to be a bit undertrained than overtrained. And Alois Jr. was saying the same thing. Bear in mind, Alois Jr. is, I think, 1 or 2 years older than Itama, so he's a very young guy too. And he was telling Moses, no. It's better to be a bit undertrained than a bit overtrained. And Itama just didn't seem to understand what they were saying. He was like, no. I'd rather have too much in the tank than too little. Which, of course, doesn't make sense, right? And the reason it doesn't make sense to Moses Itama, the reason he can't really grasp the concept of being overtrained is presumably because he's never been overtrained. He's got so much energy that he's never actually hit the wall. He's never, or at least not to the extent that he would notice it. He's never trained himself to such a degree that you actually start going downhill in your performances in the gym. You know? Most other fighters, even someone like Alois Jr., who's very young himself, has obviously experienced overtraining because he was explaining it to Moses Itama in that clip that, your performances start going down once you overtrain. And Moses was looking at him like, what? He doesn't even know what that means. He's never experienced that. That is how much energy the guy's got. All right. So, yeah, long story short, I would pick Itama to beat Anthony Joshua right now. If they fought next, I'm picking Itama all day long. That doesn't mean I would pick Itama to necessarily beat Hrgovic right now. That doesn't mean I would pick Itama to necessarily beat Bakoli right now. That doesn't mean I would necessarily pick Itama to beat Ajagba right now. I may or I may not, but I wouldn't necessarily be as confident picking him to beat those guys as I would be picking him to beat AJ. As Jake described, AJ is not the kind of guy to be old manning a young, energetic heavyweight who's willing to let his hands go. Couldn't old man Dubois, could he? You know? So, yeah, I agree with that. Jay Silver says Itama should go over to the USA. Why? Will be my question. Why should he go over to the USA? You mean to train there or to fight there? Because all the heavyweights are in the UK now. They don't have any major heavyweight talent upcoming in the US at this stage. Jan says, hey Hatman, I met Simon Jordan near Clapham, I guess you meant Clapham, Common today. He was on his way to McDonald's. He comes across friendly. Okay. Guzi says Itama should take the advice. He could overtrain for any of his next fights and get KO'd. Yeah, it was the ignorance of youth that Itama was displaying. So, a concerning sign, but at the same time, also a promising sign in that he's got so much energy that nobody's been able to push him beyond his limits yet in the gym. None of his coaches have been able to push him beyond his limits because he's still got that youthful energy about him. Jay Silver says to train, but why? I'm not sure. Is it to just get away from maybe the limelight? Is that the reason that you're saying he should go over to the US to train? Because one thing you have to also take into account is the time difference between the US and the UK. You're then dealing with jet lag when you return to the UK to fight. If you're training in the US, then you return to the UK to fight, the time difference is a lot. You know? Is it worth that inconvenience and that potential detriment? Is the standard of training over there so much better that it's worth doing that? I mean, if he wants to get a US trainer, then the US trainer needs to be training him in the UK as far as I'm concerned. Never mind all that America stuff. The only justification for training in the US as far as I'm concerned is if Itama had enough money to set up camp in the US and make it all about him, whereby he can get in all the sparring partners he wants, bring them over from Europe, train at whatever time he wants so that his body clock isn't totally different to the time he'll be fighting at when his fight is in. Do you know what I mean? And also, if the hype around him gets so big and he becomes so much of a celebrity, then maybe training in a different country would be a good idea. But in that case, you just train in Spain or something. You know, you wouldn't need to go all the way to the US. Okay, Albie Reynolds says apparently Dylan White is set to fight Hemi Ehio. Okay, Ehio only has one loss, which he avenged against Fega Apilu. Apilu was knocked out in 1 round by Joseph Parker. Yeah, never heard that guy. No, excuse me, never heard of that guy. I'll look him up. Where did you hear this? That's who Dylan White is supposed to be fighting next. Albie says it was on a TalkSport article. Okay. Triple R, interesting comment. He says, young guys would rather overtrain because they lose confidence if they don't train. Might be a different thing, but my mate who was 18 said he felt fat if he didn't train all the time and he was ripped. Yeah, that sounds like, what do they call it now? Body dysmorphia? Dysmorphia, I forget which one it is. I don't think Moses Itama suffers from that, but I get your point regarding fighters who are inexperienced maybe will lose confidence if they don't train, maybe because they don't trust their skills as much as they trust their physicality. But I'm not sure whether that's the case with Itama. To me, he seems supremely confident. I just think he's got so much energy because he's young, you know. He's got so much energy that no one's been able to actually push him beyond his limits yet. As in the trainers, the coaches. Jay Silver says, I guess he could probably get better sparring here, but just as good to get out of your comfort zone. Okay, that's a fair point, getting out of your comfort zone. But then you could go spar somewhere in Europe, you know. He should be going out to the Usyk camp. That'd be a great shout for him. Usyk's probably not going to need him anytime soon, right? Because if ever, there are no southpaws for Usyk to fight right now. But if he could, going out to the Usyk camp would be fantastic for him. In fact, scratch that. Usyk trains in Spain, right? Or at least he has for his last couple, as far as I'm aware. So that wouldn't be going that far out of his comfort zone. Shout out to Possibly on the P's. Big up. Hyro says, what about Itama Pulev? Yep, that's a good fight for Itama. I can't imagine Pulev would take it. Bear in mind, he didn't take the Fabio Wardley fight. Pulev is fighting Michael Hunter instead in a little WBA box-off that they're having. So it's going to be Hunter against Pulev and Fabio Wardley. Well, now he's going to be fighting Justice Huni. Shout out to Mr. Luca for the super chat. He says, will Frank and Eddie promote Canelo Crawford then? Good question, because it seems all of a sudden, with no explanation, that TKO, Dana White, etc., will not be promoting Canelo Crawford after all. Not sure why, but yeah, it seems now that it's going to be Sella, in a Riyadh season event. So, interesting. What happened to Dana White and TKO? And that would have been good because then it would have been on Netflix, presumably. And I think the vast majority of people would prefer it to be on Netflix rather than another DAZN pay-per-view. Be fantastic if a fight of that magnitude was on Netflix. G-Man says, Hemi Ahio, I remember he fought in Parker versus Farr in 2001 against Julius Long. Very, very unimpressed then. Jay Silver says, Dana don't seem to like the guy to let another man hold his hand, to be fair. Hyro says, Dana fumbled the bag. NJ says, surely a 19-year-old could overtrain and still get away with it, then learn their lesson that way once they realize they underperformed from training too hard. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Because the energy levels of a 19-year-old, Itama's actually 20 now, but because the energy levels of a 20-year-old are so high, when they do overtrain, it may not be as noticeable as it would be for an older fighter. I guess that's what you're saying, because the energy levels are just so high all round. Also, when a fighter hasn't been deep into a fight before, when they haven't gone 10, 12 rounds. Yeah, if you've overtrained, it will show up even more in the later rounds. Do you know what I mean? With the lack of sharpness and fatigue and all that type of stuff. Energy levels dropping off. So yeah, it's a good point you make there. Jake says, Hatman, do you think Americans still have this misconception that unless fighters aren't stateside, they are soft and won't ever get their credibility? I always get this vibe from them. Absolutely. Yes, that's still very much a thing. With American boxing fans, with American fighters, trainers, etc. It's absolutely still very much a thing. JR says, keep Dana in UFC. Boxing doesn't need him. Shout out to Raw Holcomb. JDM says Thailand is full of Jimmy Saviles. That's a fact. There's a reason that Gary Glitter, when he was on the run, he went to Thailand, didn't it? There's a reason he did that. Mr. Luca with a super chat says, will Frank and Eddie... Oh, no, I've already read that one. Will Frank and Eddie promote Canelo Crawford then? All right, I've read that one. James Walker says a lot of Thais and Filipinos in Saudi, mainly working in the fragrance shops. Figure that one out. Filipinos work in all, well, I don't know about Saudi, but throughout the Middle East, Filipinos work in all sorts of different shops. You'll find Filipinos in the supermarkets, in retail. You find them doing also in computer stores, electrical goods stores. You'll find them working in there. You'll find Filipinos working all over because Filipinos are seen as like the gold standard in terms of customer service workers over there, I want to say. And they pretty much are. Like normally if you're dealing with Filipinos there, They're very polite. They all speak in this kind of American, you know what a Filipino accent is like. It's almost like an American accent, or a version of. Ra Holcomb says, one of my colleagues said he strongly suspects Caballel of developing with PEDs, as he disappeared for a few years and has come back looking devastating where he previously looked mediocre. Who knows, right? Who knows? But yeah, he did previously look mediocre, for sure. He did. East Midlands Fight Fan says, was the Philippines colonized by America? Yes. Or held. Is colonized the right way to describe it? It was certainly held. Yeah, I want to say colonized. Yeah. Held, colonized by America for a while, yes. And that's right. It was previously a Spanish colony. That's why so many Filipinos have got Spanish-sounding names. And the language that they speak is like a mixture of Spanish and local languages and stuff like that. Yeah. Indeed, they're also, from the Spanish, they got Catholicism. That's right. Whereas everyone else in the region is either Islamic or Buddhist, indeed. And that's why the national sport in Philippines is basketball. How random is that? Because it's the American influence. Ra Holcomb says, don't you mean baseball? They play baseball as well, but maybe baseball's bigger there. But both of those sports are big there. If you're ever around Filipinos, they love basketball. How are 5'4" dudes going to play basketball? Well, when they're playing amongst other 5'4" dudes, it's no problem, is it? They're not going to be dunking the ball that much, but, you know. Let me switch up the visuals here. Iron Mike says, rarely see a Filipino over 5'10". I don't think I've ever seen a Filipino as tall as 5'10". No, never mind over. I don't think I've ever seen one that height in my life. Jordan Clarkson's in the NBA is a Philippines national. Okay. So they've actually got somebody in the NBA. So I'm on the search engine here. I looked up sports in the Philippines. It says there are 7 major sports in the Philippines. And it doesn't actually mention baseball. It says the 7 major sports in the Philippines are basketball, boxing, tennis, football, billiards, arm wrestling, and volleyball. It doesn't actually mention baseball. But yeah, I knew that basketball was a big sport in the Philippines. So as weird as it may sound, 5'4" guys on the court, when they're playing against other short guys, it's a level playing field, isn't it? Tawheed says average height for a Philippines man is 5'4". Crazy, yeah. They're very short. Ian Watson says, I've watched Filipinos play basketball in the Middle East and they are really good. JDM says his Tank Filipino mixed. He's got them slanty eyes. I've seen both of Tank's parents, or the people who are supposed to be his parents, and neither one of them is Filipino. Cal says Tank looks South African. He actually does. Tank definitely looks South African. Because a lot of the indigenous black South Africans have got a lot of Khoi blood in them. The Khoi are the original indigenous inhabitants of Southern Africa. And they look different to most other black people. They've got much lighter skin. And they've got those, slanty eyes, or however you want to describe them. But yeah, I've always thought that. Absolutely 100%. Tank Davis could pass for a South African. Definitely. He's also short like they are, because indigenous South Africans are short as well. So he's got the complexion to be like them. He's got the facial structure. He's got the height and everything. Little Jacob says, Filipinos have got such a low center of gravity, it would make them nippy on the basketball court. Yeah, but they've got very big calves. Like their calf muscles are really big. And I would think that might slow up their mobility, at least when it comes to running up and down the court. For like short movements, they might be quick at doing that. When it comes to like running up and down the court, wouldn't have thought they'd be the fastest with calves that size. Carol says it's like how Bud looks Rwandan. Bud don't look Rwandan to me. I tell you who does look like they're from East Africa, a particular country in East Africa. P. Diddy looks Somali. Like P. Diddy looks so blatantly Somali, it's incredible. Literally. Iron Mike says, yeah, he does. Diddy is the most Somali-looking black American I've ever seen. He looks like his name should be Abdi. Trevor says apparently Diddy did not like people saying that. Or saying that he looks Somali. Somebody says Ab Diddy. Killing it. Ab Diddy. Crazy work. Goozy says Diddy looked a mess now from them court drawings. You know, I don't know whether it's because of the state it's happening in, but I'm kind of disappointed that they don't have footage from the courts, because normally in these big American trials, they've got cameras inside the court. Like the OJ trial, for example. You got to see it all. All the footage would come out like every day or every week. But the Diddy trial is like a UK trial, because in a UK trial, they don't allow video cameras. So all you see is these like drawings and stuff. These chalk drawings. But yeah, Diddy, head and beard full of grey hair. Is that from the stress? Or was he just dyeing it before? Or has he actually dyed it grey to try and get sympathy from the jury, you know? Different tactics. Jay says, I bet Diddy's loving it, loving life in prison. Dominic says, can't dye your hair in jail. Well, if you got enough money and enough influence, you can definitely dye your hair in jail. Carol says ASAP Rocky's case was recorded. So why isn't Diddy's? Oh, okay. NJ says, I think no video because it's a federal court case. OJ was state court. Is that why? Okay. Yeah, I heard about Chris Brown getting arrested. Over some old stuff, right? I've heard he's in protective custody. In seg, as it's called in the UK. Segregation. Jay Silver says people are going to be pressing Chris to sing. No, not if he's in segregation. He ain't going to be getting pressed. JDM says Brown is on remand until July for glassing a producer, I think. Big up Ivan. He says, which celebrity would you be least surprised if they turned out to be a monster? Depends what you mean by monster. But to throw some names out there, I don't expect this person will ever be exposed. But, and they're not necessarily a celebrity. Well, they're famous, but they're not like an actor or anything. I wouldn't be surprised if Bill Gates was literally a monster. You know what I mean? Like a monster beyond all imagination. Spacey, yeah, well, Spacey, there were some accusations against Spacey, which went away. You guys remember that? There were also accusations against Bryan Singer, the director, and those accusations went away as well. Bryan Singer, of course, directed The Usual Suspects, which Kevin Spacey starred in. And there you see on screen, that's when I managed to capture Bill Gates on camera. There he is. That's his original form, his real form. He only assumes the human form when he's on camera. You know, TV camera. But, you know, I caught him lacking. Jake says, Hatman, your videos about Khan's mad antics used to crack me up. The one you did years ago when he led Hearn and Brooke down the garden path just before announcing the Canelo fight. Yeah, Khan was just hilarious in general. Both intentionally and unintentionally. East Midland says, is Khan a bit fruity? Well, funny enough, even though Khan was telling Kell Brook to come out the closet, you guys remember that? He was trolling Brook, saying it's 2020, whatever it was at the time. Like, it's okay. You can come out and be yourself. You can live your truth. Remember when Khan was saying all that to Brook? I swear it was after Khan had said all that to Brook that a story came out that Khan tried to hit on some transformer. You guys remember that? There was a story that came out in the papers that Khan was trying to hit on this transformer. Oh, Khan's a trip. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, what fighter do you believe had the biggest failed potential in UK boxing history? David Price? Definitely not David Price. Kirtland Lang is up there. Kirtland Lang. Who else would be up there? Billy Joe? Yeah, maybe Billy Joe. Some people are saying Audley. I'd even say Tyson Fury's got to be up there. Because he could have done so much more with professional dedication and what have you, in my opinion. Harold Graham. That's a great shout. Harold Graham. Was he unfulfilled potential, failed potential? Maybe. Yeah, maybe Harold Graham. He might be the number one, actually. Oh, okay, that's a good shout as well. Ra Holcomb says Prince Nassim. Yes, I do think Prince Nassim didn't fulfill his potential. Because he also used to not take his fitness and what have you seriously between fights. He'd blow up in weight. And of course now he's permanently blown up, hasn't he? Prince Nassim, he's blown up like Harry Potter's aunt. You know in that Harry Potter movie where he blows his aunt up? That's how Prince Nassim is permanently. Matt says Campbell Hatton. Definitely not Campbell Hatton, because Campbell Hatton never had any potential. As far as I'm concerned, like, he was never any good. He never had any potential to be good, in my opinion. East Midlands Fight Fan says Kell Brook. Yeah, to some extent, Brook. Iron Mike says Anthony Ogogo was a decent prospect. Well, he was a decent amateur. But in the pros, he was poor. He got beat by some random guy from the Midlands, Ogogo, and suffered eye damage and never boxed again. He's now a professional wrestler, last I checked, in America. Is it in AEW? Is he still in AEW, Ogogo? How random is that? Ian Watson says Ogogo was good on Big Brother. Was he? Matt says Anthony Yard. The thing about Yard is he's done as well as he could have done, given the lack of amateur experience. Maybe he could have been managed better. But in terms of his development as a fighter, being trained, I maybe agree that he would be better off with someone like Adam Booth, who can make the best out of his fast twitch athletic capabilities. But really, Anthony Yard getting much further than he has, in my view, would have been contingent on him starting boxing much earlier, at a much younger age. Because I don't think he ever laced up a pair of gloves until he was about, nearly 20. Casa says, who's the lad from Preston who keeps getting locked up? Scott Fitzgerald. Iron Mike says, Tyrell Biggs could have been great without the nose candy addiction. Well, it weren't nose candy, it was crack. Yeah, he was taking it to the next level. And Tyrell Biggs was American, obviously. But yeah, Biggs. Crack cocaine addiction. The 80s was crazy in America, the crack epidemic. Crazy. Shout out to Matt. He says, I feel like when you make $200 to $300 million from your boxing career, you can't really say they failed at their potential. Fury set 10 generations. Okay. If you're talking about earning potential, then yeah. But if you're talking about fulfilling their physical potential as a boxer and maybe maximizing their high-level wins, maximizing their or fulfilling their potential as far as resume, then I would say Fury hasn't fulfilled his potential. But he's certainly done very well commercially, absolutely. But I think he could have done a lot better as far as legacy if he'd, been more responsible, keeping himself in shape. Little Jacob says, Pinkland Thomas had all the attributes of a great heavyweight, but drugs derailed his career. Yeah, he was a skaghead. Can you imagine? Pinkland Thomas was on skag during his pro career. That's how crazy the 80s was in America. That you had top contenders on skag, and Pinkland Thomas held a version of the world title at one point. Man was on skag, bro. It's incredible. He was on skag. A lot of the other guys are smoking rocks. Create Your Emotion says, do you think that's why he ducked so many opponents? Because he hadn't been training properly? I'm referring to Tyson Fury. I think that's part of it, yeah. See, Tyson Fury is one of these guys who performs best when he has some level of fear. But he's not an easy guy to scare. And so I think Fury really struggles to get up for fights, That's why his performances have been so inconsistent over the years. That's why his training is so inconsistent. He's like the polar opposite to AJ. AJ never struggles to get up for fights. That's why he's chiseled. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, genetics is a big part of it, but that's why AJ's doing AJ's training camps are 3 months. It's insane. This guy's doing 3 months training camps for every fight. I can assure you that Tyson Fury is not normally doing 3-month training camps. He's doing 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, max for most of his fights. Create Your Emotion says, do you think AJ could be overtraining then? Yes. I think AJ has overtrained a lot in his career, to be honest. I think he's overtrained a lot. 3-month training camps for a guy that size is totally overdoing it. Shout out to Ben. Prime Butterbean versus Current White. Who wins? I'm still going to go with Current White. Actually, no, I'll go with Butterbean. Because then I just thought about that Ebenezer Tete fight. No. I'm going to go with Butterbean. No, I'll go with White. I'll stick with White. Because Butterbean was pretty damn rubbish. Prime Butterbean got stopped by a guy called Mitchell Rose. I think that was at Madison Square Garden. Back in the 90s. That was his first loss. Mitchell Rose is no good. I think that fight's on YouTube now. Stopped him in the second round. That was Prime Bean. Mitchell Rose was a journeyman. I think he was a ex-con. Mitchell Rose as well. Don't quote me on that, but I think he might have been. Raw Holcomb says, do you remember the massive heavyweight explosion tournament where this UK bare knuckle guy claimed to be 42-0 in a yard road? Yeah, I do. He got ironed out by Burt Cooper. Yeah, I remember that. He came out fighting like somebody from the 1800s. His boxing stance and even his build looked like a bare knuckle fighter from the 1800s, bro. It was bizarre. And yeah, Cooper dispatched him in very short order. Casa says AJ trained like an absolute warrior. To be fair, 3 months would have been killing himself, especially the joints. And that's the issue he's got now. AJ's got some kind of elbow issue. That's why he's having surgery. Like 3 months for a 6'6", 250-pound heavyweight is way too long a training camp. You don't need no 3-month training camp, especially for a guy who always eats clean and, do you know what I mean? He's not a slob. He's not boozing and stuff like that. So, 3-month training camp's way over the top. Someone says John Fury-esque. Very John Fury-esque, actually. Very, very John Fury-esque. I forget the guy's name now. But he was very John Fury-esque. Fight Sport Talk says, I remember before the Klitschko fight, AJ training in the sand, almost like the guy is too professional. In fact, earlier on, somebody said that young fighters might overtrain because they're nervous. I think AJ is still doing that even now. AJ doesn't have the natural baseline level of confidence that Tyson Fury has, or Usyk, or maybe even someone like Dubois. His baseline confidence is much lower than theirs. And he builds his confidence up by doing this ridiculous amount of training, which I personally think is doing him more harm than good physically. Paul McAllister says, Lennox Lewis ducked John Fury according to John Fury. That's right. I remember when he said that. That was at the post-fight press conference following the Fury-Klitschko fight, when John Fury started saying that, he'll fight David Haye and how he spoke to his old trainer and Lennox Lewis was terrified of him in his prime. And yeah, John Fury's a legend in his own mind. Confidence is a funny thing because everyone can build their confidence, right? But everyone's confidence has a limit. It has a ceiling. Just like your physical potential or your intellectual potential, academic potential has a ceiling, and everyone's is different. Such is the case with your confidence. And generally, the people that have a higher baseline level of confidence tend to have a higher ceiling. And as I say, AJ's baseline confidence is just nowhere near as high as many of the other top heavyweights. And there's not really much you can do about it. It's just, he's wired the way that he's wired. He's as confident as he's ever going to be. He's never going to have Usyk level or Fury level confidence. He's just not wired that way. East Midlands Fight Fan says, Hatman, did you box? Yes. Darry says AJ needs to be super strategic with his next fight. I think he should retire. Personally. I think he's done. He should retire. If he insists on continuing, I think Dylan White is a good fight for him. And that's according to Tunde and Spencer. That's who AJ is looking to fight. Obviously, they tried to set up the AJ Dylan White fight a couple years back now, but Dylan White failed yet another test, which has all blown over now, isn't it? Dylan White knows how to handle these situations better than most. Barely anyone even talks about it. But yeah, AJ, if he insists on carrying on, then the kind of opponents I think he should be looking at are Dylan White, Deontay Wilder, and Tyson Fury, his contemporaries. I don't think he should go anywhere near any of the young guys. Even Jared Anderson, to be honest with you, I think that's a very risky fight for AJ. Some people are going to say that's crazy because Anderson has looked terrible in his last fight and he got battered by Bacoli. But I say it because of Anderson's youth, you know? And if Anderson can get confidence back, I think he's a problem for Anthony Joshua because he throws loads of shots. I know AJ dispatched the Charles Martin with ease and Anderson struggled, but Anderson throws a lot more punches than Anthony. When Anderson's on form, he throws way more punches. He's way more aggressive. He's less concerned about what's coming back. I'm not saying that Anderson would definitely beat AJ, but I think that's a risky fight for Anthony Joshua, being honest. Shout out to Ben for the super chat. He says, I think Dubois relentlessly attacks Usyk punch for punch, balls to the wall, and gets the stoppage this time. What about you? Usyk is 38. He can't last forever. Yeah, when you reach this age, this stage of your career, and you're in there against a young guy with momentum, who's aggressive, that can absolutely happen. But I do think that Dubois struggles with the angles of a southpaw. I do think he struggles with southpaw angles. And I think that's why he wasn't as aggressive, or one of the reasons that he wasn't as aggressive against Usyk as he is against most other people. Because the angles just seem so weird to him, you know? Having to reach further to land his right hand. Everything just seemed odd to him. He also struggled with Kevin Lerena. So he may want to be more aggressive against Alexander Usyk, but we'll see what happens when they actually step in the ring again. We'll see. That aggression might only last for a round or two, and then he'll realize, okay, these angles still don't work for me. Yeah, people still laughing about the down goes Johnny. Poor Johnny Fisher. Rob says, hello UK, watching all the way from South Africa. AJ saved the heavyweight division regardless. We should also talk about that. I started watching heavyweight boxing after coming across the Prime AJ. Yeah, AJ, without a shadow of a doubt, was instrumental in bringing the heavyweight division back to popularity, without any question at all. He brought eyes back to the heavyweight division, and therefore eyes back to the sport. Obviously, he did not turn out to be the best of the bunch, but he was usually in entertaining fights. Either he's going to knock you out or you're going to knock him out. That's generally how it goes with Anthony Joshua. Kylie says, Johnny seems like a good lad. It's his father that's the helmet. Boxing is littered with overbearing fathers. You know, for me, the whole Fisher thing, the dad was kind of annoying. Not John Fury annoying, but, you know, still a bit annoying. And the whole Essex gimmickry was laughable. It didn't really anger me or anything like that. It didn't vex me. It was just a laughable thing that they were doing, that whole Essex crowd, you know? The whole thing was a farce. Shout out to Jay for the super chat. He says, Prime John Fury versus Johnny Fisher. Who wins? Bosh. That's a good one, you know. I'm going to go with Johnny Fisher over Prime John Fury. Yeah, because John Fury couldn't punch. He couldn't punch. So even though he may have been a better technical boxer than Johnny Fisher, had a bit more craft about him, he was never going to hurt Fisher because he had pillows for hands. And Fisher could hurt him. So I'll go with Johnny Fisher over John Fury. Prime for prime. Paul McAllister says, do you believe there's anything in this theory that Dubois has gained shagging strength? As in, since he lost his virginity, he has developed more confidence and this has led to improved performances. You know what? I think there is some truth to it. I'm not saying that's the only reason his performances have improved, but I do think that has helped his confidence to some extent. As weird as it sounds, I think it was, you know, like a coming of age type situation outside the ring. Because ever since he got that Brazilian girlfriend, he talks more in interviews. He smiles more. He's got that pep in his step. You guys remember, I think it was Harry Enfield and Chums rather than the Fast Show, when he had, you know, the Kevin and Perry characters. They originated on Harry Enfield and Chums, right? Rather than the Fast Show. And there was one episode of Harry Enfield and Chums where Kevin, is it Kevin? The one that Harry Enfield plays, I'm going to say it's Kevin, and Perry's the little one, played by the woman. When Kevin loses his virginity, and his entire personality changes overnight. You guys remember that episode? His whole personality like switches up overnight after losing his virginity. And that's like Daniel Dubois. It blew his mind. Getting some box for the first time in his life turned his world upside down. Literally blew his mind. It does that to some guys, you know? Certain man, the first time they get some box, their whole personality changes, and normally you'll never hear from them again. You guys ever met someone, known someone like that? A guy who, when he got his first girlfriend or lost his virginity, you literally never heard from him again. Certain man, their mind is blown the first time they get some box. You will literally never see the guy again in your life. Because for me, the first time I got some box, it wasn't a mind-blowing experience. It was just like a box ticked. Excuse the pun. It was just a box tick. It was like, okay, tick that box. It wasn't like a mind-blowing thing, and I didn't want to be in any kind of relationship with the girl, you know what I mean, who I slept with. It was just a nice little box. Okay, I'm part of the club now. Box ticked. But certain men are mind blown by the experience. They're totally like, I don't even know how to describe it, but you know what I mean. I'm sure you've all known someone like that. Shout out to Jaden Ellis for the super chat. From box to boxing, indeed, or from boxing to box. East Midlands Fight Fan says, how old was you? I was about 13. I want to say 13, 14, somewhere around there. Jake confesses. He says, I'm not going to lie, Hatman. When I had my first beat, I remember leaving the house in the morning like I could literally walk on water. So you were moonwalking down the pavement, dancing on the ceiling like Lionel Richie. DD says, that's abuse? Are you mad? What are you talking about? When it's two people of the same age, it's not abuse, is it? I weren't, 13, 14 with a grown woman. It's like 13, 14 with a girl my age. Dylan says, NJ says, Dylan White had his first kid at 13. I think how mad that is. Yeah, it is mad. Because he was probably 12 when he knocked her up. So, and Dylan White only arrived in the UK when he was 11. So he didn't hang about, did he? Man arrived in the UK when he was 11 and he had someone pregnant within the year. That's the Jamaican way, innit? Dear, oh dear. Shout out to Green Entity for the super chat. He says, I'm attending a boxing gym for the first time this summer. I'm slow, got really good stamina. I'm short and got long arms. What advice can you give? The best advice I can give you, right now, is to go over to my friend's YouTube channel called Boxing on the Edge Tutorials. His channel is absolutely made for people first getting into the sport of boxing, who are just getting into the sport. He does fantastic tutorials on there, walks you through all the basics. So, yeah, head on over to, in fact, I'll drop the link in the chat right now for his channel. Fantastic channel. Boxing tutorial videos, very, very well explained. He's actually based in New York. Let me get his channel up here. There you go. I've dropped the link to his channel in the chat. Click that link, subscribe to that channel, and you'll get some great pointers and advice there. But just generally, don't try and do too much too soon. the most important thing to try and master is the jab and your defensive moves and footwork. Okay? Those three things. With a good jab, a reliable tight guard, and footwork, you can beat a lot of novices that way. A lot of people who are as inexperienced as you are, just by having those three things better than they do them. So, again, high guard, master the jab, and your footwork. Now, with time, you may be able to drop your guard. You may be able to develop your own style. But when you're first starting out, you need to minimize the amount you're getting hit clean. And that comes from keeping them hands up, and using that straight jab. One of the things a lot of novices do is they try and throw too many different types of shots. And because their muscle memory isn't there, their chin will be in the air, when they're throwing these wild flailing punches. And that's how you end up getting hit, hurt, etc. So just stick to the basics. And if you do the basics better than most other novices, you're going to win your fights. You're going to win your sparring sessions. Not that sparring sessions are scored, but you're going to get the better of most sparring sessions. So just master the basics and don't try to do too much too soon in your boxing journey. But yeah, definitely subscribe to Boxing on the Edge tutorials. It's a fantastic channel, which is made for beginners. I mean, it's made for beginners. It's mainly aimed at beginners, but there's plenty of stuff on there which is also relevant to experienced boxers. It's a great channel. Shout out to Ben. He says, prime Roger Mayweather versus Rolly, who wins? That's actually a good fight. That is a good fight. See, Roger could punch a bit, and he had some slickness to him. But he was vulnerable, and Rolly's vulnerable. That's actually a really good fight, Rolly versus Roger Mayweather. I might actually go with Rolly, though. I might go with Rolly. I might go with Rolly because Roger Mayweather, I want to say, was still fighting when they were doing same-day weigh-ins. At least some of his career, when they were doing same-day weigh-ins. And the significance of that is you're not as big on the night in the ring. So, because Rolly Romero was huge when he fought Ryan Garcia. Man looked like Anthony Yard or something. Muscles in his back, and he looked massive. So I might edge towards Rolly, just because of the size. If they're the same size, then I'll probably pick Roger. But I want to say Rolly's bigger. So I'll go Rolly. But it's a good fight. Jake says, Hatman, biggest feather duster man in boxing history. Malignaggi is up there. Yeah, in terms of pillow fists, Malignaggi is definitely up there. Malignaggi's up there. Sven Otka is up there. He's one of the most pillow-fisted guys. Who else? NJ says Huey Fury's up there. Maybe Huey Fury. But Malignaggi might even be the number one, James Walker says Amir Khan. No, Amir Khan is not. No, not Amir Khan. Amir Khan dropped a lot of people. dropped Lamont Peterson, dropped Marcus Maidana. Nah, not Khan. Barry Jones, yes. Little Jacob says Calzaghe. I don't think so. Drop Eubank, did Calzaghe. Drop Chris Eubank, the iron-jawed Chris Eubank. Sonny Edwards. Oh, yeah, Sonny Edwards got to be up there, for sure. Marlo says Paulie was a decent fighter. Yeah, he was a decent fighter, but just no power. Pillow fists. But Sonny Edwards, for sure, got to be up there. Guzi says Shakur. Maybe, but he's not like Malignaggi pillow-fisted. Malignaggi, crazy pillow-fisted. East Midlands Fight Fan says Ricardo Lopez, I guess you're being sarcastic. Ricardo Lopez was a tremendous puncher. Finito. That's why they call him Finito, because he finishes you. Yeah, unless someone can suggest better, then I got to say Malignaggi takes the crown. As pillow-fisted as Barry Jones was, he still managed to drop Acelino Freitas. Acelino Freitas was a monstrous puncher. Barry Jones had him on the deck. Yeah. G-Man says there was an IBF champion at 140 about 10 years ago. He had a record something like 46-0 with 2 KOs. John Fury. Oh, there you go. That's right. John Fury pillow-fisted. Definitely. Shout out to Michael Schiller over there in Inverness. Same says has to be Sonny Edwards, was a light flyweight as well. That's a good shout, G-Man. Buster Mathis Jr. as a heavyweight, yeah, he was really pillow-fisted. That's right, Buster Mathis Jr. couldn't bust a grape. That's right. Shout out to Green Entity for the super chat. He says, also graduating from my home high school on May 22, and I'm graduating from my career center school on May 23. Wish me some luck. Sending all the luck in the world your way. Green Entity, big up. On your graduation. Wishing you all the luck in the world. In all your endeavors. Clarissa Shields. Hey, that's a good shout too. But then, a lot of female fighters are feather-fisted, so we have to bear that in mind. Ollie says, do you think there's ever been a female champion who could beat any male champion in any weight division, any period? Probably not. In order for any female to stand any chance whatsoever against a male in a weight class, she would have to have ridiculous punching power. Ridiculous. Because females are not as strong and they're not as fast either. You look at a female welterweight. They're not as fast as a male welterweight. It's not just the power and the physical strength that they don't have. They don't even have the speed. So to compensate for all that, it would have to be a female that is outlandishly powerful with their punches to get them any kind of chance at all. And I can't think of a female like that. I mean, Christy Martin was a real good puncher, but her opposition was awful. Somebody mentioned Ann Wolfe. I don't think Ann Wolfe would have stood a chance against, men in her weight class. And indeed, how would females take the male punch? Just doesn't seem realistic, does it? You saw what happened to Clarissa Shields in sparring with some random journeyman. Hit her with a left hook, flattened her. She's come out with all the excuses in the world, but we know she's delusional. That's probably the first time a man has not pulled his punch against her in sparring, because you see those clips of Clarissa Shields sparring men, and it's so obvious that they're pulling their punches. It's so obvious. But the one time a man didn't pull his punch, she was flat on her back. Just some random guy. He wasn't even any good. He was a random. And he flattened her. So, yeah, I doubt it. Jay Silver says, Clarissa Shields versus Sonny Edwards. Now, how's this for nightmare fuel? Sonny Edwards, some of you may remember, asked Clarissa Shields out on a date. And Clarissa Shields, I swear, accepted. She's dating Papoose now, the rapper, but Clarissa Shields accepting a date with Sonny Edwards, it gives Clarissa Shields versus Sonny Edwards a whole new meaning, doesn't it? JR says, oh God, no, indeed. Oh God, no. Nick says, Sonny getting pegged by Clarissa 101%. JR says, I'm trying to eat here. Yeah, this took a very dark turn. Harold says, Papoose, that's the throwback. Yeah, that's who Clarissa Shields is dating. Papoose, the rapper. Iron Mike says Papoose loves masculine chicks. He does, yeah, because he went from Remy Ma, who's masculine as hell, to dating Clarissa Shields. God only knows what that's all about. And Clarissa was threatening to punch up Remy Ma. Tarquin says, who remembers when they were pushing for Scott Cardle versus Katie Taylor? I don't remember that. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying, yeah, I don't remember that. Jay Silver says, Sonny is surrounded by violence, molded by it. Yeah, Sonny really likes to hype up where he grew up, innit? Sonny Edwards is from Croydon, but then he also spent some time living in, I think, Birmingham or somewhere in the Midlands, because he's got this weird accent that switches between South London and Birmingham. Throws me off all the time. Same says Sheffield. Are you sure it's Sheffield? No, he's got like a Midlands, Birmingham accent. Sonny Edwards. He switches from between a London accent and a Birmingham accent. It's definitely not Sheffield. He's got some type of connection to the Midlands. Some type of, like I say, connection to the Midlands. Kayvon Green says, any thoughts on the Diddy trial? Yeah, we spoke. If you rewind the stream about, I want to say 30 minutes, you'll hear us talking about the Diddy trial. We were chopping it up about Diddy for quite a while. Adrian says, Sonny Edwards lived in Sheffield. I believe his child is from there. Okay. In fact, let me look it up now, because I'm certain. And I mean, you can just tell from his accent that there's some Midlands connection there. Maybe you'll... Is there any information about it on here? And the funny thing is, his brother Charlie doesn't have that same thing. Yeah, his brother Charlie doesn't have that weird Birmingham twang mixed in with his South London twang. He doesn't have that. It's only Sonny that has it, so I'm not sure what that's about. So it says, he fought out of Repton. It doesn't say anything about living in the Midlands. It doesn't say much about anything about his life, really. So who knows? Where that comes from. Shout out to Ben. He says, Willie Pep, Maxi Rosenblum, Nicolino Loche. Is that a question? Or is that in relation to something we've been talking about? The pillow-fisted guys? I guess you're talking about the pillow-fisted ones. Yeah, pillow fist, yeah. Thoughts on Bricktop Eubank Jr. defamation settlement? Obviously, Bricktop has been paid. They've settled out of court. And whenever asked about it, he smiles, saying, I'm very happy with the settlement. I'm very, very happy. So that's his way of rubbing it in. He got an amount of money out of Eubank Jr. All right, peeps. I'm going to bring this one to a close. Shout out to everybody who joined the conversation. And as always, a special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. It's been a blast. Make sure you guys take care of yourselves. Be good. Make sure you, especially if you're just getting into boxing, go over to Boxing on the Edge tutorials and subscribe. Great content over there. But for now, as I say, take care, be good, and I'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.